I woke up this morning, and that wasn't too long ago, as you can probably tell by the hair. But I was immediately bombarded with a large collection of push notifications. Like every single website that I have push notifications on for, I swear my secret Pinterest account was going off about Sandro Tanali being caught betting again. Now, this is a very, very complicated issue that happens in like modern sports, because while the Premier League is actually doing, I think, a better job of dealing with betting stuff, by like they at least don't have betting sponsors on the front of their shirts anymore, then I would say a lot of different leagues around the world, or US sports leagues. I mean, if you're watching the NBA, like the basketball league on TV, they've got live betting odds, like an option to have those just up right next to the actual game, which is patently insane, because everybody knows the rules of these sports, that you like the actual players can't bet, which makes complete sense, right? Because they're the ones that are in control of, for example, a lot of things like different prop bets or overs and unders about their particular performance or whatever. Like, obviously, you want to make sure that you preserve the integrity of the game. But a lot of these leagues, and the Premier League is not entirely absolved from this, they just don't have the sponsors on the front of their shirts. Like, for example, Sky Sports, in an article that was one of my push notifications, says that Sandro Tanali was pictured signing for Newcastle. The backdrop was plastered with logos for a betting firm. Right? I mean, it's not like it's not something that's around Premier League players just because it's not on the front of jerseys. But these leagues are trying to make as much money as possible, but also avoid a catastrophe. But I can tell you right now, we are barreling towards that catastrophe, okay? Because there are a lot of different opinions about sports gambling in general, but the truth is it's legal, and the more that you're making it available and encouraging it, the more players are going to do it. I think that's a pretty straightforward assumption. This is something that's happening in the U.S. as well. There's an NBA player named Jonte Porter who called out of a game with an illness or like an injury a couple of times, and his under, like, under 7.5 points or whatever, was the highest money earner on the entirety of like a major betting site every single time he was calling out of games. So he's under investigation at the same time. This is something that is hitting multiple sports because of the amount of wagering that is being encouraged. Sandro Tonali is just a part of that. Then there's this complex side issue about gambling being an addiction. I'm actually somebody that I do believe that that's probably true. I also believe that the punishments for gambling should be very, very severe. There is a suggestion in the Sky Sports article, perhaps we should be asking whether banning players is the right solution when dealing with an addiction. Now, I believe that gambling's an addiction. I don't take any gambling ads. I've been I have no issue with those companies. They're legal companies. I've gambled before, like TwitchCon was in Las Vegas. I went in with a set amount of money, determined to lose it to have a good time, right? Like and then every once in a while I'll bet on a sporting event, right? But for some people that becomes a cascade. I'm aware of that, and so I don't take any betting ads. I turn just because I don't want to encourage that. I don't want to be a bad influence on people. But I do also think that a lot of things in life can become a serious addiction that you need help to get out of. A lot of people get addicted to food, or certain type of food. Look, I'm not an expert on this. This is just like my fly by night kind of opinion on it. And I still think that like gambling in sports, if an athlete is gambling, I do think that there should be a pretty serious punishment for it. I know that because in the United States, I talked about this, I believe, when Ivan Toney got suspended. I don't remember how many friggin' charges that was, but Ivan Toney got a fat wad of gambling charges. It was like 300 something, right? He placed wagers all over the place, right? And he got less than a year. There was a dude in the US and the NFL that placed one bet and got suspended for a year. Literally, I mean, yeeted it. I believe a lot of the leagues in the U.S. have a zero tolerance policy where if you are proven to have been gambling, you get one shot. It's sitting out for a year. I guess it's a one tolerance policy, and then if you do it again, you're literally banned from the league. One of the best baseball players in history is rumored to have bet on some of the games that were played, and he's not even in the Hall of Fame. He's just been yeeted into the sun, and largely that seems to have dealt with the issue most of the time. The problem is the U.S. is now discovering sports gambling on a scale that it's existed kind of I want to say in England and in Europe for a while now, and that's going to throw it more into a lurch. But I do think that the actual the idea of suspending these guys is the right way to go about it, because I don't really think there's any other solution. If you don't do that, a ton more people are going to gamble, right? Whether it's an addiction or not, the reason the suspension exists is because that's the only thing standing between like a player just looking at a way they can make a ton of money, right? Seriously, if you were particularly a lesser paid player, let's say you're one of the guys in the reserve team, you get called up to the first team for a few matches, you're hanging out with guys that are making $300,000-$400,000 a week, and you have an opportunity on some weird prop bet or some sort of bet or whatever to try and win a wager that could make you as much money as you're willing to put into it. I mean, that's something that's very, very attractive to these players. But I've gone too long without giving you the actual lore of what happened. So Sandro Tanali is currently serving a 10-month suspension, which is already going to see him miss the Euros, right? He was the big money signing of Newcastle. The suspension is 10 months. And that was for betting in Italy. While he was in Italy, that was initially 18 months. It was lowered to 10 because Sandro Tanali agreed to enter rehab. That is great. I believe that reducing the suspension for somebody that agrees to get therapy or rehab or whatever is a fantastic way to go about it. The suspension still needs to be there, but it's a fantastic way to go about it, right? And these charges were while he was in England, which is a tough look, but also I hazard you, I think they have the dates here, that these 50 bets have been found in this investigation from the 12th of August to the 12th of October. So he was suspended like 6 days after that. He was suspended later in October. So I believe I need to look this up. Hold on. Now, what's interesting is if you read the Athletics article from the time that it happened, like Sandro Tanali betting investigation, it says on October 12th, he was questioned by police. So either this was like a giant turning point for him, and earlier that day he placed a bet, right? Because they're saying that the bet there was a bet placed on October 12th, clearly because that's the end of the range, right? That's the same day he was interviewed by Italian authorities about illegal gambling, right? Like that is the exact same day, which is insane. That is terrifying. But it also means that could have been like a big turning point for him, right? Because we don't know what time of day either of those things happened to occur. Obviously, if he placed a bet after being investigated for illegal gambling, the dude has a problem, and it's probably not anywhere close to done. And if you continue your investigation, there might be some more wagers out there. But if this was before that meeting with the Italian authorities about illegal gambling, that meeting might have been a moment where he went, like maybe we don't do this. But this is before the first investigation allegedly, began, right? There might have been parts of that investigation the Athletic didn't know about or report about or wasn't able to for whatever reason that were before October 12th. That would be a big problem for Sandro Tanali because that means he was betting after he knew he was under investigation for illegal gambling in Italy. But this did occur before what actually caused him to get suspended in the first place. So now they're who knows how long this suspension is going to be. I'm a little confused on how long the suspensions are going to be. Now, the Italian thing was one thing, right? He was using illegal gambling sites in Italy. Obviously, if he was using legal ones, it would have been easy to figure out who Sandro Tanali was. A lot of these people will use their friends and just be like, hey, by the way, bet this. Or take this money from me and bet it for me so it's under your name. It's Sandra Tanali instead, right? And nobody's going to see that coming. But the UK does seem to be a little bit more lax when it comes to this sort of enforcement. I'm talking specifically about Ivan Toney, who got basically a year for 300 plus bets. So as long as none of these 50 bets are on actual Newcastle matches, I could see him only getting a month or two. But again, that's just speculate. That's there might be wagers that are considered much more punishable. There might be a second offender increase, even if that first offense was in Italy, right? That will up how much he's out. But the point is, this guy is going to miss the beginning of next season at the very least. And that is terrible news for a Newcastle team that really misses having, I would say, its best midfield. I mean, it'd probably be their best midfielder when he comes back, right? Ivan Toney seems to have returned in stride, but a team that's missing its best midfielder and is trying to climb in and make it a big 7 instead of a big 6. And they've invested a lot of their money and into a player that seems unable to actually play games for the stupidest he did not stop betting on games until the investigation into him betting on games started. From Italy to England, this dude was just betting on games the whole time. Honestly, that gives me if I pop the tinfoil hat on for a second, that gives me a spicy conspiracy theory that AC Milan might have known, or at least had a whiff that he was involved in this, and just divested themselves of Sandro Tanali, cashed the check in, and now all of a sudden he's suspended for a year and a half. That's why you probably got to do a really good due diligence before you buy a player for this amount of money. Not that due diligence would have been able to find this. Clearly, it took a little while for this whole betting thing that Sandro Tanali had going on to unravel, but the takeaways I've got: 1, this is going to continue to be a giant problem in the game. 2, you have to have some form of suspension in there. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is because Sky Sports suggested that maybe you shouldn't have any suspension at all. And 3, this Sandro Tanali situation is, at least before the investigation started, prolific and very, very bad. And then if they find anything after that first investigation, like after that meeting on October 12th, it's going to get a lot worse, and he's not going to play for a real long time, right? Well, we might not see Sandro Tanali on a field until 2025. That is entirely possible. We'll see where the rest of this investigation goes because all of the news kind of just broke. But RIP to Sandro Tanali. He was one of my favorite midfielders in the world. Hopefully he's able to get back on a field soon and stop betting on stuff. All right. See you guys.